part of the records maintained and available for analysis. And again, the centralized call recording from LiveVox, speech analytics from CallMiner are great ways to take a look at that challenge. By way of background, I'm a Chief Marketing Officer at LiveVox. I'm a 30-year contact center veteran with most of that time spent in operations, including some time as a compliance officer. Today, I'm really pleased to have a very, very distinguished group of speakers. We've got Joe Birch, who's Chief Operating Officer at ARM, Brandon House, Director of Southeast Sales for CallMiner, and Steve Vaughn, the Senior Director of Product Management for LiveVox. If we could take just a minute, gentlemen, to tell us a bit about your background, starting with you, Joe.
Sure, John. Thank you. Joe Birch, COO of Accounts Receivable Management. Been with ARM for 32 years. We are headquartered in Thoroughfare, New Jersey. We're a full-service agency that specializes in first and third-party collections and been in operation now for just over 35 years. We have 3 sites and employ approximately 300 collectors.
Thanks, Joe. Brandon?
Brandon House. I'm the Director of Southeastern Sales here at CallMiner. I also head up our collections financial services vertical. I've been doing analytics now for about 10 years.
Great. Thank you. Steve?
Yeah, so I'm Steve Vaughn. I'm the Senior Director of Product Management. I work with a number of folks internally at LiveVox to ensure that we're doing the creation of the correct products for us going forward long term. I spent probably close to 25, 30 years in this business also, and 8 years of it as a Vice President of Product Management for Genesis, and as an example, another 8 years doing global work in professional services for Cisco.
Great. Thanks, Steve. And again, thank all 3 of you in advance for being so willing to share your expertise today. If we could go to the next slide. So on today's webinar, we really hope to cover the following topics, as well as at the end, as Travis said earlier, there'll be time to answer some questions. One, the industry is excited about speech analytics, largely driven by 2 things. One is compliance and the need for it, and compliance at reasonable cost. The other one is a way to basically improve or optimize performance. It's easier to get now. Migrating to speech analytics, migrating to centralized call recording solutions so you can get at it has never been easier, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We also want to explain how the LiveVox CallMiner partnership can benefit you, the key strengths and importance of cloud integration, and also talk a little bit about the fact that you can dream this up, you can talk to a vendor and actually have deployment in as little as 60 days. So it's very, very attainable at this point. Absolutely unlike anything I've seen in the past, when this kind of deployment was a very, very complex, long project. So why now? Organizations like the CFPB are mandating greater transparency and accountability, and I think it's reasonable for them, and it's reasonable for creditor clients certainly to expect more and better records and record keeping. The capture of agent audio and the storage of agent audio is relatively simple, straightforward, and relatively inexpensive now. I can see it becoming as expected by auditors as a history of your financial transactions, how interest was calculated, how payments were applied. Speech analytics, don't get twisted up around words, it's business analytics. And you can't have good business analytics unless you're capturing all the data. Certainly in the contact center business, that would be manual calls, inbound and out, as well as anything done through equipment, your ACD, your IVR. You have to have all of it. Again, business analytics without complete capture of all the data is largely pointless. And then the third point is speech analytics closes the gap between sporadic sampling and systemic analysis of agent consumer audio. And again, heretofore, you were faced with really a tough choice. You could either boil the ocean and analyze and listen to, and in many cases manually try to listen to every agent-consumer audio interaction, or you take a very small sample, and neither one of those is really sustainable. This has been the hurdle. It's integration. It's bringing together disparate equipment, multiple sites, making it all work. After 25 years of running just about every premised dialer solution in the multi-contact center operation world, I can attest that this is one of the biggest things you have to face in leveraging new technology is the integration. And quite frankly, in a premise world where I came from, I was always presented with great ideas for ways to improve compliance, great ideas for ways to improve my agent's performance, but I knew that the hurdle just of even testing it as far as integrating it with my CRM and with my other premised equipment was such a big hurdle that I couldn't do it. So I'm an ops guy. I might know what I want or need in order to run efficient operations. It's IT guys like Steve that had to take me through it. And again, at this point, I want to bring in Steve Vaughn, who's got a great deal of experience in overcoming hurdles like that. Steve knows the hurdles involved in integrating premised equipment, and now that he's joined LiveVox, he understands the simplicity of integration with cloud solutions.
Yeah, John, thank you. I appreciate that. So, John said, gosh, I spent 25 of my best years trying to get equipment like what we're all dealing with on a day-to-day basis to integrate together. And I'll give you the classic example. I just joined LiveVox about a year ago, but right before joining, I spent a good part of about 8 months over in Scotland working with a very, very large bank, and we were doing a deal with 30,000 seats, call centers all around the world. And I'll tell you right now, the biggest challenge that we had in getting this stuff installed wasn't necessarily, getting the complexity of all the different call centers to work together, although that was a real challenge. The biggest one that I call the voodoo doll, nobody wanted to touch, was clearly the integration piece with call recording. It's very, very complex, as John alluded to, and it's something that a lot of you are going to be faced with in a challenge in the next 12 months, 6 to 12 months, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. You can see here, what's the importance of call recording? Well, your world just changed, and I think everybody's going to embrace that. As John just talked about this, the CFPB, it's a $550 million organization that's been mandated to watch over the likes of our market. They've got 60% of their entire staff making over $100,000 a year, 5% over $200,000. These are no lightweights, and guess what? They're watching all of us very, very closely. So the importance of call recording becomes one that's very, very simple. If you can't ensure that 100%, and this is the key, 100% of all your calls are being recorded centrally, you're going to put yourself, your company, and your customers at risk. And I don't mean that very lightly. Now, despite all its importance, the ability to capture 100% of all our calls today and all the agent activity is extremely difficult. And I gave you an example of one we just went through over in Scotland. And it especially gets more difficult when you start to deal with multi-site call centers. And why? Well, again, what's happening is a lot of you are sitting here looking at your budgets, and you're saying to yourself, oh my gosh, I've got to deal with the CFPB. I've got customers who are going to demand that I get 100% call recording. How am I going to overcome this huge hurdle that's been in front of us? So
yeah. Steve, what you're saying is you can't get all your calls, and I guess what I'm hearing is, what's the point of speech analytics unless you've got 100% of the agent-consumer transactions? Yeah,
you nailed it. I think, and John, you and I were talking about this just the other day. 60% of your calls being recorded, or 80%, or 90, or 95% isn't going to cut it anymore. The CFPB has made sure that your customers are going to demand that happens, because they don't want to have that, that proverbial knock on the door late at night. And as one great president said a little while ago, there's the 9 scariest words that you could ever hear, and that is, I'm from the government, and I'm here to help you. So you don't want that. We don't want that either, and that's the reason why we're demanding, and you're going to get demanded of you, each and every one of you, 100% call recording and the analytics behind it. So if you go to slide 7, this is a typical premise-based single site set of hardware that you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. It's what your typical data centers look like. All right, so you've got your CRM, you've got your ACD, you have to integrate into IVR, PBX, dialer, call recordings, all those sort of things that we're very, very used to. And that's what you've been dealing with, for the last 20 years. And in fact, all that great old software that's been running for the past 20 years, stuff that I wrote. Now, you got to get that all working, and you got questions like, am I going to do line side recording? Am I going to do trunk side recording? Oh gosh, now I got to have all this storage. How am I going to store all this? Am I going to do it on some PCs? Am I going to do it off-site? Now I have to get the bandwidth to do all this. The complexity gets, just almost overwhelming for a lot of you. But don't worry, enough time and money, and you can get this done. And that's where we're at today. A lot of folks right now are at that point where they don't have the time, they don't have the money, they don't have the budgets, and it's starting to kill them. So the other problem that we really experience here is that even if you are able to get this all working in what I call the legacy systems, it's brittle. You can't move it. If you have agents that have to be moved, or if you need to bring up agents at, say, a home office, you're going to find yourself in a problem area that you can't solve, and your IT folks are going to be screaming at you, please don't change anything because it's very, very brittle and it's very costly to get it up to speed. So if you go to slide 8, now you just multiplied your problem. Now you don't just have one call center. For a lot of you, you have multiple call centers. So that means you have that picture of the equipment I just showed you earlier at each and every single one of your sites. So the question becomes, gosh, how do I virtualize all of these call center recordings? How do I get this down so I can record it? I want one set of metrics so I can respond to it accordingly and ensure that I don't get myself in the middle of a conversation with the CFPB as the Bureau or even my customers. These are tough and challenging times for IT now because they have to maintain this for you, especially if you're in operations, and they have to do this with very little budgets, very little time, and aging equipment. I think one of the virtues of being in the job that I'm in, and I think John attested to this, is I get an opportunity to go out and talk to a lot of customers like yourself. And I sit down with a lot of folks over a hot cup of coffee and I ask the question, what percentage of your calls are actually being recorded today? And I think a lot of you would be shocked. Some are just zero, and then some folks, everything between 60, 80, 90%, and even some folks think they're doing 100%. I'll talk about that in a minute. But I will tell you now, and I'm going to kind of put my neck out here in a stretch in the chopping block, but I'm going to make a prediction. In the next 6 to 12 to 18 months, the majority of your accounts, your customers are going to be asking you to do one thing, and that is get on-call recording. Because they, like all of us here, do not want to be faced with the challenge of that knock on the door and having to do a complete review with folks like the CFPB. That's what's going to be coming down the pipeline. They're not going to ask for just 60% of your calls. They're going to knock on the door and say, let me see all of your calls from, as an example, your home agents. And when you pause and say, oops, I may not have that because that's not part of my 60 or 80 or 90% pool, that would have been fine a year ago, but it's not going to be fine today. How about those hard phones? Yes, John.
Steve, I was just going to say, and again, that's certainly our speculation, but I think it's reasonable speculation. And quite frankly, looking at some of the folks on the call today, almost most of these folks aspire to record the calls anyway, because again, they have nothing really to hide. And I think that's part of the problem of integrating, is to make sure that you fill in those nooks and crannies. Typically things that are done with home-based agents, sites that maybe don't have the same equipment, and or you've got the manual phone. I mean, a hard phone on a desk is, and you can talk about that. You actually have a picture of one right there, but a hard phone on a desk is almost like a red flag, because those typically route through the PBX and oftentimes aren't captured by centralized call recording and speech analytics.
Yeah, absolutely correct. And the point I was just trying to make is I think the world is changing, as you were saying, John. And if you don't have the capability to be able to do that call recording, the home agents, hard phone, PBX, or manual dials, we're all going to put yourself in a risk position, and you don't want that. So very, very good point. Appreciate that. So now you understand the benefits. Let's take a look at what the costs are. Let's go to the next slide. You can see in front of you here, if you're going to go into this business, you have to be able to have, first and foremost, you have to get your CFO's buy-in. You have to have the capital expenditure, the CapEx dollars. You have to have the purchasing of all the hardware. you have to integrate all the APIs, installation. You have to bring folks in to make this all work. And that's very, very difficult and in a lot of cases unsustainable, as we've talked about. So with all your speech analytics and recordings, it can be extremely costly. And with that old, outdated 1990s software and equipment, it gets to be even more of a challenge. Again, trying to get this done today is always going to be, risky business. And if you don't do that, we're going to put yourself in a position where you don't, again, want to be sitting in front of the CFPB or your customers. So either way, trying to get all this done is always a potential going out of business model, and that's the reason why a number of you have not potentially gone forward with going with the full 100% recording. So this is what I call the defining moment here, and you can see the chain has a weak link. And essentially, you either have the ability, or you have the ability, or you have the inability to move forward with 100% recording and compliant storage. And I'm not going to read through the list you have in front of you here, but it's really a catch-22. Because if you don't dedicate those resources to manage the integration and capture all the data, then you're left vulnerable to things like inconsistent storage and retrieval, inability to get after agent account IDs so you can go back and trace back to all the calls, inability to effectively monitor recordings occurrences. You may not even be PCI compliant, and capacity allocation are going to become a real issue. And those are real challenges that you need to overcome. So really, it becomes very obvious what we think is the right solution, and that is moving from the premise-based systems to what we call the cloud. And that's really what we call a centralized call recording. It is our solution. It's a second solution. Technology that's fundamentally different from the traditional models that we've all lived with over the past years. The idea of moving all your functionality for your call centers in the cloud has now given you, really all of you, a tremendous advantage, and that is centralized recording. Now, this one option gives you the full capability to ensure all your voice contacts with your customers' accounts are all recorded, and what's best, it's built right into our cloud solution. Now, you do nothing to get this integrated. There's no labor costs, there's no consulting costs, no additional equipment purchases, no additional software to ensure that you have 100% of your calls recorded. Now, on top of that, through our PCI certified cloud platform, LiveVox offers centralized call recording where all agent, account, and call activity exists in a single, fully accessible yet secure platform, and it's all done automatically. So, as a final comparison, if you look on the left-hand side, you get what I call the chaos, is what we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis with the older equipment that you got, the hardware and the software we're trying to keep moving and running on a day-to-day, like I said, basis. On the right side is the call center in the cloud platform. You choose. At the core, it's simple. All activity that happens in a call center is essentially data, and when you have different types of data coming in from multiple places, across multiple sites, in multiple ways, well, you're left with a huge integration headache, as we've been talking about. And when you have a fragmented network, call recording data, you also have fragmented system of speech analytics is what we're trying to drive to. Because, again, speech analytics is one as useful as the data is based on. So missing data means risk. Data that can't be traced back to an agent means risk. You get the picture. So essentially, LiveVox Cloud Switching Platform provides a single point for all data collections, enabling a complete set of recordings for effective speech analytics, and really a single point of integration for all applications, just like speech analytics. Now, with 100% recording, now comes the ability for us to partner with a speech analytics company that we all have heard about, and that is our friends at CallMiner. So what I'd like to do now is introduce CallMiner's Brandon House. And Brandon, why don't you take the next few slides and kind of dig a little bit deeper here for us into why we do all the speech recording and how we can, take that to you and make sure the analytics is correct so we get the right metrics. Brandon.
Excellent. Thanks, Steve. Go ahead and jump to the next slide for me. All right, guys, and I'm going to keep my portion of this as brief as possible, and as was mentioned at the beginning of the call, we'll have plenty of time for QA at the end if there's anything we need to drill deeper into. So the reality of the situation that everybody in the ARM industry faces is very much the same. I think that Steve and John did a great example of explaining what the CFPB is going to mean to everybody. So where does speech analytics fit into this? We just learned about the benefits of 100% call recording, and I think that is obviously paramount to this problem. But how does speech analytics fit into this? Currently, and I'd go out on a limb myself and say that probably most of the people on this webinar are not listening to 100% of interactions. And we're saying speech analytics, but the reality of what we're offering here is unified analytics, and this is where CallMiner can help. It's the ability to take your QA process now and be able to bring in every single interaction between your collectors and the debtors. That's every single chat, email, Twitter, etc., so that you're able to look at that information in one structured database and be able to drive the business intelligence out of that. Next slide, please. Some of the things we're able to do with speech analytics, and again, very, very high level, but you'll start to be able to see things from this presentation that will start to have questions bubble up for you. Being able to look at 100% automated monitoring for things such as the mini Miranda. It's something that we challenge every single individual that we speak with from the CallMiner standpoint, is we ask them before we even start an engagement, do you have 100% mini Miranda compliance? Do you have 100% RPC? These are things that speech analytics enables you to be able to answer yes to that question without a doubt in your mind that every single call, every single time, a mini Miranda is being read and they're trying to establish the right party contact. Being able to improve your promise to pay rates. Do you know that your debt collectors currently are asking for money? I know that seems like a no-brainer. Shockingly enough, when we come in and we do our initial analysis phase for the CallMiner Eureka solution, we're able to see that most collection companies actually don't have 100% where they've established RPC and people are asking for money. Ultimately, that gives you the ability to do two things here. Number one, you're going to increase your revenues across the board. By increasing revenues and also increasing compliance and reducing liability, you're going to be able to gain new portfolios and expand your business even further than you do today. Next slide, please. And there's a couple of different ways that we do this, and again, just very high level for you. We have a collection-specific offering that comes out of the box with categories that would be beneficial to you. So you can run the system with the out-of-the-box categories as they are, or the system is set up so that you're able to tune and tweak the system to fit your business needs. This gives you the ability to identify suspect collectors, so it's no longer looking for a needle in a haystack. You're able to pinpoint FDCPA violations as they're happening by agent and be able to drill down on those and coach that agent to be able to either rectify that behavior or remove that agent. It's not all bad. Some of the things that you can do in addition to being able to look for violations, the other side of the coin is how are you able to look at agents that are knocking it out of the park, that are staying within FDCPA mandates, still collecting more money than anybody else? How do you take that information and glean that from your agents and be able to put that back on your training floor? Speech analytics is there to help you with that as well. Next slide, please. So I'm going to take a few seconds and walk through a very typical case study that we found through our expertise with the collections field, and then I'm going to turn it back over to John, and then ultimately you'll get to hear directly from one of our customers. This case study is a collection agency that's on the West Coast. It's a great case study. They've spoken for us publicly several times. They installed in June of 2010, and the one thing that I've noticed before the CFPB came down the pipe, a lot of collection companies out there have the same vision, which is ultimately to change the way that they do business and change the way that their industry is viewed. And that's exactly what this customer looked at. They looked at what they were doing from a QA perspective and seeing the same things that I mentioned before. A lot of uncertainty in what was happening between those conversations. With their existing QA staff, they were able to listen to about 20% of the calls. And, if you get a sample rate of 20%, you may or may not be able to get an actual representation of what that agent's actually performing like on the phone. As I mentioned in the previous slide, they were unable to replicate successful behaviors. They knew they had agents that were, doing the job correctly, staying within compliance and collecting more money than anybody else, but they were unable to, with that 20% sample rate, be able to replicate that. Again, here under business challenges, the most important one that I will mention today is, the mini Miranda. That seems like a no-brainer for everybody. Everybody has a script that's supposed to be adhered to where the mini Miranda is read every single time. That is probably the single easiest violation to be able to, bulletproof yourself from with regards to the FDCPA. Once Eureka was implemented and we got on site and got in there and started cleaning things up, they were able to search for anomalies in less than 3 seconds. So where their QA staff was looking at 20% before and being able to look for needles in a haystack, they were able to sit down at a terminal and find things within their audio in 3 seconds. They had effective compliance on 100% of all their calls as opposed to the 20%. What they found from that, and this is the most important thing, 9 months after deployment, we sat down with them to have what we call a win analysis and understand how they were using the system. They found in that 9 months that their lawsuits were down 30% over 9 months, where in the same time, the national average for lawsuits for FTCPA violations was up 30%. The biggest portion of that is because, and call it Orson Welles' Big Brother if you'd like, but the collectors were aware of a tireless supervisor. There was no more gray area. Every single interaction on every single call, the agents were aware moving forward that they were 100% in compliance because they were going to be held accountable for everything they did on the phone. And obviously, the president and CEO of that organization drops it in there in their words, and that's obviously, if you visited our website or looked at any of our previous press releases, that's a pretty well-documented speech that was given out about the 30%. So with that, I will turn it back over to John. John?
Yeah, Brandon, thanks. It was good stuff. And I just might add that I talked to another customer who I thought it was interesting that originally he sought out speech analytics because he wanted to improve his compliance. Again, I think everyone on this call would like to think that they're exactly where the CFPB is right now, but we're all learning as we go along. And in his quest to kind of skate to where the CFPB puck was going to be and to take care of the consumers, he brought in speech analytics, and he said it absolutely helped him out. And then later, kind of it paid for itself actually by improving the agent performance. His agents were having better interactions with the consumers. Complaints dropped. He had full visibility of what was going on, and again was a very, very happy customer. And with that, I really like the fact I've got this next gentleman on the call, Joe Birch, because again, the point of this is to separate kind of marketing hype from reality. And so we like to bring in a customer who's actually, Joe's a customer of LiveVox, he's a customer of CallMiner, and he can actually share with you his personal experience. And Joe's Chief Operating Officer of Accounts Receivable Management. He's got decades of experience in this business. He has a reputation as being one who embraces technology to move forward, but also always operating with the best interest of his customers and the consumers at all times. And I think, like I said, it was no surprise that Joe was an early adopter of linking the LiveVox call recordings with CallMiner. And with that, we can go to the next slide. And Joe, are you ready?
I am. Thank you very much, John. Appreciate that. So let me start by discussing a few areas that led to our decision to partner, both with LiveVox and CallMiner. Obviously, in our industry, increased regulations, increased client requirements. We were tasked to find a solution to fully integrate our call recording platform while utilizing speech analytics software across multiple sites. LiveVox had already afforded us viable options for compliancy through its product along with its call recording suite, and looking to add to that technology with a speech analytics software, it really became incumbent upon us to make a decision that something that would work all in one area, handle all sites, handle all calls, and it just really gave us an opportunity to continue down this path to become a more compliant agency. Excuse me. It was necessary that we would create a solution that brought our call quality and internal quality assurance team together. The Eureka solution that we chose from CallMiner afforded us that ability. The process to integrate was just about transparent as could be. All recordings now flow directly from LiveVox directly to CallMiner at predetermined times. We get a return of 100% results on all of our calls versus that tedious task of several Q&A personnel listening to a handful of calls in hopes that they find enough right party contacts to fill, the internal requirements. So the ability to have all sites, all calls, regardless of inbound, outbound, a dialer campaign, manual calls, talk-offs, all being 100% recorded, scored, and analyzed, has really allowed us to actually reduce the number of personnel needed to handle the small function of calls that they were getting to, while really giving us immediate results on the entire call database. This integration has now allowed us to spend the valuable time that we need to take that data and make our staff more compliant and overall better collectors, which ultimately leads to consumer and client satisfaction. So let's face it, in today's industry and our climate today, pretty much most of our clients have moved away from just looking at dollars collected performance and really are putting more of a focus in their decision making to compliancy and call quality. Even for some, they're now rewarding their agencies with additional opportunities or additional market share if you provide exceptional compliancy and quality results. So we now find ourselves working both ends of the spectrum, not only performance for dollars collected, but exceptional performance for call quality. So in addition, now with the formation of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, we really wanted to ensure that we were in line with their requests and their upcoming and pending requirements, and that we could afford our clients some comfort in knowing that we as an agency, that they're now is equally responsible for, if not more now today than prior, was doing everything that we could to protect their interest and their choice for choosing us, but also to change that climate and provide the consumers with a fair and professional phone call in our attempt to collect the debt. The ability we have with this product and working with our quality assurance team is just exceptional. It's allowed us to provide our management team with a comprehensive look at their collectors on all calls, not just a few. We're able to find specific areas of additional training that they need, not just saying, oh, this collector's not getting it done, his phone calls are, not the best, but it really hones into an area that they need to work on up-training and enhance that individual collector to make them better. We've been able to now, over 6 months, have the collectors have really bought into this program. They know that every call they make is recorded and scored. We now have even been able to incorporate their scores and their grades into their compensation package, which goes a long way. Really depending on what portfolios they're working, it really adds to the value of having a collector that, A, can perform in their collection side of things, but as well in a customer service environment in their call abilities with the customers. As we progressed, we have really enjoyed the ability, since 100% of the calls are recorded, to take that data, produce immediate exception reports that can pull out calls. Was a mini Miranda missed? Was there a call where there was no disclosure for call recordings? Another instance is the ability to make sure when a settlement's offered, was that 1099-C disclosure read? It's definitely enhanced our ability to be a better agency and not just look at those collectors that always hit their numbers, but to collectively work with the new hires and those less than average collectors without guessing and turn them into better performers. As we move down a little bit, client-specific scorecards, this has been invaluable to us. With all of our clients having different requirements, different criteria for call calibrations, different ways to open a call, specific times when things have to be said, we're able to filter that down and create client-specific scorecards and exception reporting based on what their needs are, when it has to be said, what has to be said, and what point in the call must it take place. Good example is we have a client that there has to be a specific opening read within 20 seconds. That's over and above your mini Miranda. We're able to build that into our scorecard and ensure that our collectors are hitting all those data points that need to be hit within a certain amount of time. Again, that just takes that weight off of our management staff. They're able to take that information and really build on an individual client-by-client basis and train to that respective client's requirements. We can also see how collectors fare against their coworkers within the same group or versus the entire staff and across sites. It's pretty amazing that the tools we've been able to extract today, and again, being very young from this integrated solution. And probably one of the biggest benefits that we saw out of this, as well as the compliance side, was how do we increase revenue opportunities by utilizing this? And again, just the ability to take a look at your RPC calls immediately. Were they converted? Did we see opportunity missed by a collector by possibly not accepting maybe an offered smaller payment arrangement or not transferring the account for a talk-off? We actually now provide those calls to our management team on a daily basis to re-educate or up-train their collectors. In addition, we now have the ability to ensure that our right party contact talk-offs, which in our industry have always been an issue, they're being handled. They're being a call's transferred properly. Someone's getting on the phone to assist the customer and just move forward, with that phone call in a positive manner. So, pretty much in closing, we were able to make these choices with the very quick return on investment. We didn't sacrifice performance or additional expensive costs. Everything's housed in one area. It's an exceptional product that we are proud to go out and talk to our clients about. The industry's ever-changing for all of us. We appreciate the partnerships and the development by LiveVox and CallMiner, and just the continued opportunity that we know they'll be there to continue to develop and enhance the products that they have today. That's it from my side, John. Thank you.
Hey, Joe, thanks a lot, and I couldn't help but just jot down a couple of thoughts while I was listening to you. And one is, you're using tools, and I'm hearing you basically building and reinforcing a culture of compliance. And I can't know what the CFPB specifically is going to look for. I think their agency examination rules will be coming out shortly. But I know one thing that they'll get a sense of is, do you have the tools for compliance? Do you have a strong compliance infrastructure? And are you building, or do you have a culture of compliance? And that goes a long way. And the other thing I heard that again, you've always been cutting edge is, I think that there is an assumption that you can't have increased compliance and increased revenue. Those terms absolutely do not have to be mutually exclusive, as long as you're selecting the right technology and approaching it with the kind of attitude that you've got. But again, thanks. Like I said, you're a prime example of contact centers that are not passive businesses, but are trying to work with the CFPB and again, skate to where the puck is heading and where it's going to be. And again, after working with so many years in this industry with you and a number of the folks on the call I know and I've worked with in the past, these are folks who are innovative and are trying to do the right thing by their client, by the consumer, and certainly by the CFPB. And I'm excited that, actually, believe it or not, I'm kind of excited. I think when the CFPB comes to some of these agencies, they'll be surprised at the degree and the culture of compliance that has been built and is being built. The one thing that I think will stand out, though, is if there are gaps in recording. And again, if there are some accidental gaps in recording or the infrastructure is not there currently, I think that's a red flag. And as I said earlier, I think the day will come where a hard phone that routes through a PBX instead of through the central call recording that's accessible for speech analytics also will be a red flag. But anyway, again, Joe, thanks a lot. That was great stuff. Now, a little bit more about the specifics of deployment options, and I'm going to go to the next slide, and Steve Vaughn, ask you to come back in.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thanks, John. So really at the simplest level, we have multiple ways to integrate in with our friends at CallMiner. The first one here is the most simplistic of all, and I'll ask Brandon to go into some others here in a couple seconds, but sort of stage one, what we do is we zip up all of, your calls, your MP3s, XML files, any data, and we put it out into an SFTP server someplace that's very, very secure. And then roughly about every 6 hours, what we call sort of a stage one of integration, CallMiner goes in, grabs all those files, all the data, and then begins to process it. Now, we make sure that all the calls are recorded at the appropriate level, which is a 32-bit rate, so it's real clear and concise, and it gives CallMiner the capabilities to really, I guess, as you were saying earlier, Brandon was, to mine that data for you so you get the exact results you're looking for. Now, this is just one perspective and one option, and there are other options if you want to go a little bit deeper in integration. And let me ask Brandon to step into those here in a second. Can we go to the next slide, please?
So one thing that I think we've all tried to convey to everybody on the call today is the amount of flexibility that this partnership has, and CallMiner is no different as far as our end here. We have listed here, we have our three typical deployment options. Obviously, we are extremely interested in working with this industry and making, offerings that will fit. But the three that we have up here now, and this is just, food for thought for you, is the way that a typical deployment goes. First and foremost is our hosted SaaS model, where, as opposed to you having to rack and stack any analytics hardware, we go ahead and host your information in our secure data center. We are PCI compliant. We would tunnel directly into LiveVox, get the calls from them. It's no muss, no fuss, and it's extremely seamless. That is a yearly subscription to the software. Imagine your Salesforce.com model. And we typically start our negotiations with a 3-year minimum, but again, we are extremely flexible in trying to find what works best for your business. The next option, which I will talk a little bit about because it's something that we've released to the market, and it's fairly new for us, but we also have an in-network recording / analytics solution, which is built out through your carrier, so Verizon, Terramark, et cetera. That is built out to you per the minute. And that comes through your carrier, so it adds on to your monthly bill from the carrier. Again, those subscription options are varied as far as how we deploy that way. And then last is your traditional premise subscription. Now, this is something that in this industry, especially with certain portfolios, and I'll name off the top of the head, I know Amex is one that is very particular about this. They don't want you to take their data off-site. If that is the case, we do have a premise subscription solution where you would rack and stack hardware. We could still have the same integration with LiveVox as we would have in a hosted solution. However, the data would not be leaving your site. Again, that's a yearly subscription to the software, and the term for that, we start at a 3-year minimum, and we can adjust as what's needed for your business.
Great. Brandon, thank you. I appreciate that. So as we can see, there are other delivery and deployment options other than the one I just mentioned. And I think that gives everybody an opportunity to kind of review your own plans going forward. The key here is options, and that's what we always want to be able to provide to each and every one of you. So with that being said, we're going to continue to develop and evolve our solutions with folks like CallMiner, and we think that we want to continue to make the most effective solution in the industry, both in terms of technology and in an integration standpoint. That is easy and quick for you to get to. As Brandon was mentioning here, you don't have to wait around very long for us to get this up and moving. So please, if you got an opportunity to reach out to us, we'd be glad to work with you to get you moving in a direction that is really going to be critical for you going forward in terms of speech recording and analytics. So that being said, John, I appreciate the time here. Why don't you take it and wrap it up?
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Brandon. So to kind of summarize what we've talked about so far, businesses are looking for speech analytics to basically cost-effectively mitigate compliance risk amid rising client and CFPB expectations. And again, in the accounts receivable management space, you might add activist attorneys general as well. And at a recent conference, I actually had the pleasure of attending about a 3 or 4 hour session that dealt specifically with the CFPB and, again, trying to anticipate, their expectations. And I jotted a couple things down that I'll share for you. Again, if you're into centralized call recording, 100% call recording and speech analytics, compliance is top of mind. Obviously, increased revenue and agent performance are as well. But I really think that they will expect financial analysis level audit trails. Retention of and access to records that include obviously financial, but also CRM, all agent audio. That would be inbound, outbound, transfer, and I think all data linked, synced, and indexed. So it's easy to get at and find. And I think the other thing is they're going to be looking for evidence of a very, very strong compliance department, preventative tools, Q&A tools, Failure analysis. When a call doesn't go as well, what are you doing with that? Are you black boxing it to find out how you can get better next time? And again, I think the one thing that came out loud and clear is a strong, independent, centralized compliance department. And that's a difficult thing to get to if you don't have 100% centralized call recordings and you don't have speech analytics. Again, as I said before, many folks who really feel pretty good about their compliance, or they did, and you know what, it was good compliance, but situations change, business change, regulatory environments and regulations change, and those things like sites that maybe missed call recordings, or any agent or even a manager's ability to make phone calls manually or on the dialer that aren't absolutely tagged and linked and associated with an account. That's a problem. Again, not just regulatory auditors, but client auditors as well are often frustrated because as they look through an account, they see a note, but the audio is either missing or it doesn't match up. And oftentimes that's because that call was performed manually through a PBX. And again, a PBX doesn't know how many times that number was attempted. It doesn't know many things. Typically, it's not the best way to manage time zone restrictions or state dialing rules, things like that. Achieving comprehensive call recording is unsustainable for multi-site operations on premise-based networks. And as Steve said earlier, you can get there, but you can get there at very, very great expense, and both in terms of money and even more importantly, time. And once you do get there, those are brittle. They're very, very brittle. Things go wrong. Centralized call recording enables 100% call recording and provides a single point of integration for speech analytics, and that's absolutely important. Again, one shouldn't even think about pursuing business analytics in the form of speech analytics unless you've got all the data. I mean, sampling a little bit of it, as we talked about earlier, sometimes you would take a small sample, but when you would do that because you couldn't get at everything. But when you did that, you took a representative sample. But if you don't have 100% call recording, then you're basically, anything that misses means that you're taking a sample, not 100%, not the universe of the data, and that's a problem. And that's not a representative sample; that's just an accidental sample, making it even less statistically valid. Speech analytics is a great way to analyze 100% of what's going on, and again, always be watching for compliance risk and ways to improve. And again, as Joe Birch mentioned, building that culture of compliance where it's serious. It's part of your language. And I heard Joe say it works its way into compensation. There is no stronger way to show that you're building a culture of compliance than actually build those things into compensation for agents and managers. Speech analytics, as Brandon said, it easily identifies outlier calls, it points within a call, and agents. And you can basically provide actually there ought to be an ongoing compliance dialogue. Compliance is more important now than ever. It's always been important, but that has ramped up, and it's ramped up excessively, I think, as people try to figure out exactly how the CFPB will manage agencies. But in my 30 years in the business, there's always been a performance dialogue between the agent and his or her manager. There should also be a compliance dialogue, and again, not a sporadic thing, but continuous. And speech analytics gives you a chance to have those continuous dialogues about how to improve compliance and get better and better at what you're doing. And that summarizes what we've done today. We do have a few questions that I'll address here, and let's see what we've got. First question. That's a good one. I have an existing call recording application, and to my knowledge, or what I'm hearing, we're pretty covered on our call recordings. What are some things I should ask for to test whether or not I have gaps or whether I'm not covered? And again, that's a good question. Again, I think the expectation for call recording has been raised significantly. And again, I remember back in the day, all of my outbound calls were recorded on the dialer, but manual weren't. But I felt like I had a very compliant organization. In this day and age, that's not the case. So for both call recording and speech analytics, again, we talked about this. They leverage a random selection to test recordings. On the surface, it seems like you're covered, but you've got to dive deeper and ask some hard questions like, call recording for inbound and manual dials? Are all of those manual phones or all those hard phones routed through some kind of equipment to record them? And even more importantly, are they routed through something that's linked to your CRM so that you know that that call has been called, or that account has been called 2 or 3 times that day, and you don't want to call it again? You do not want to overpenetrate that account. PBXs generally don't do that. Does it know about time zone dialing rules? Does it know about state-specific dialing rules? Many folks now have soft phones, an X-Lite or even a Skype soft phone that allows agents or managers to make phone calls, but those almost never force an association with an account. So kind of off-documented conversations can take place with consumers that aren't recorded and are not associated with anything. And even if they are recorded, those recordings are all but worthless unless they're associated with an account with a date and time stamp. Ad hoc dialing restrictions. There is a hurricane in a certain area, and you do not want to call into that area or those zip codes or area codes and prefixes during a set time. You need to have that ability. And if you've got manual phones or those soft phones that aren't linked in with your dialer and your CRM, you're at risk there. Let me see. Actually, there's a couple more. As a payment processor, we will frequently need to audit a collection agency for Visa MasterCard compliance. We always ask for a copy of the recorded call. Will this give clients the ability to pull the call as a WAV file and send it via email if necessary? Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing, it's interesting, the evolution of the thought towards call recording. I can remember when it became widely and inexpensively available, some folks said, I'm going to record them, but I'm only going to keep them for a short period of time. And quite frankly, good operators, which are really most of the folks I know in this industry, actually all the folks I know in this industry are good operators, and they have good intentions. They now record everything that they can, and they keep them for a long period of time. And what they like about it is, it prevents cases of asymmetric information. If they're challenged in a lawsuit or a complaint, they're able to actually listen to the call, and they're able to understand exactly what happened with that call, and they basically have complete information. It's not one of those things where they're negotiating or they're dealing from a position of weakness or lack of information. Let's see. I know you guys aren't regulation experts, but do you have any insights on how the CFPB or other contact centers are viewing speech analytics? Okay. It's a good one. Yeah, we're not attorneys. I'm not even smart enough to talk to attorneys. And basically, our comments about the CFPB, those are the opinion of Steve Vaughn, myself, Joe Birch, Brandon. We don't really know what they're going to do. Obviously, I'm trying to interpret where they're going and what they're going to do from visits with and studying them. But let's see. Best keep an ear to the floor. I was recently at CFPB where Peggy Toohey spoke about the direction of the agency. From that session, I learned a few major things. The CFPB is definitely moving forward with a bent towards really getting into and looking at what the agencies do. Big creditors, obviously, are also driving this direction. Again, the CFPB has already visited with a number of the large creditors, and some of those are creditors I've worked with for years, and I know them to be, operating very, very much, trying to take care of the consumer, trying to always do the right thing, and even they were found wanting in some areas. My guess is lack of documentation, more record keeping may well have helped those guys too, especially around agent audio. I certainly know it'll help you. And last question that I've got, or last question I think we have time to field today, is CRM systems are one of the major things I need to consider if I move my platform. What are some of the major CRM systems that you all integrate, and how difficult is it to integrate? It's a good one. Hey, Steve. Steve, you want to take that one?
Yeah, let me take that one. Seems a little bit down my bailiwick here in terms of integration. So, for LiveVox, we're built on a number of open APIs that we've been developing over quite a bit of time here, which has really helped us out to integrate into systems like our friends at CallMiner. So we're built for that, and quite frankly, it doesn't matter what CRM system that you have. If it needs to integrate, there's a really good chance that we can make it work for you. And that it's going to be much faster or much cheaper than, I tell you from experience, than trying to do this on a premise-based system for all the reasons I just discussed in the last few minutes here. So, like John, all the applications, including CRM systems, are used to, manage the flow of data, and here at LiveVox, we offer a single path of data flow. So really, it's a single simplified path for all your integration. Again, there's a very, very good chance we can integrate to about anything that's out there. And if you find yourself in a position where you need to integrate it, then please, raise your hands and we can go into it. So, quickly get to the point, though, we developed, a lot of fairly well standardized integration models with major CRM systems like, the example, Latitude, Cubs, and CR. Those are just a few. So, but the key takeaway is we have an open set of systems, or I should say APIs, that really broaden us out and give us the capabilities that in the cloud that are really very precious for us to go forward with. I think that's what I got here, John, and you only got a couple minutes left.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Steve. And we'll go ahead and wrap this up. As far as the integrations go, too, I think the direction, we do this for a number of our customers, is really create a virtual agent desktop that pulls together the CRM as well as whatever other underlying databases may be there, so you can able to present the agent with just what you want them to see. And the other thing that's very, very beneficial is you can lock those agents down, so anything that they do has to be associated with an account, and you've got very, very good tight control. You've got 100% call recording again, so you're building up that you've got a complete collection system for that data so that you can feed it to the folks at CallMiner, again, to help you manage and create that culture of compliance. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody for joining the webinar today. I'd like to thank our speakers. There were a number of people asking to speak during this, and I just would remind you that there's actually a question box there. If you get those questions in, and I'm sorry we weren't able to get to all of them. If you want to get those in, we will address them. If you'd like us to call you, give us a phone number as well. But if you want to ask those, if you'd like to email them in, you can email them directly to me if you like. That's jmcnamara, JMCNAMARA, at livevox.com, LiveVox.com, and we'll be glad to get to them. And with that, I'd like to conclude the webinar. Again, thanks everybody for joining. Brandon, Steve, Joe, thank you so much. Good afternoon.